Michael and Trish have been involved in Orgonomy for a very, very long time. And he has been a writer and an editor in this field of science and medicine for 45 years. And he's been using the accumulator also since early youth, and has been also many years in orgotherapy with Josh Raphael, as also one of the trainees of Reich himself. He's also organized many, many conferences, given lectures, published articles and books, and they have founded a group called the Mind Shift Institute to introduce people to new knowledge that could bring about a more evolved worldview. Anyway, the work has helped others, a lot of other people learn about life energy, orgonomy, and healing. And I think he's made a great influence on a lot of people. He's also, so anyway, I'd like to just go ahead and start. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I was waiting for them to. They say you live by your PowerPoint and you die by your PowerPoint. It's. I'll just begin when Dr. Simonian sent around his first email about this conference. Someone had asked a question at a Orgone conference in Mexico, and the person said, everyone talks about energy, but it's so vague. You never say what it really is. You never say what you really mean. And if I'm remembering this right, Dr. Simonian, you answered him, said, no, we do say what it is and so forth. But on the flight home from Mexico City to LA, he thought, no, we don't really answer the question. And so that's the origin of my presentation today, is to try to help be specific about what is meant by orgone energy. And when I was young, I had a very interesting education. I had a great teacher. Most of my education was outside of school, so I had to do the ordinary schoolwork. But because of that, I studied in high school from the pre-Socratics all the way up to the 20th century in philosophy. And so I was introduced to the whole tradition of life energy. So I learned about prana and chi and pneuma and all the way into the 20th century, stone, elan vital, and Entelechy by Reich, and then Uspensky and Teilhard de Chardin and the spiritual traditions. And it always interested me, but it was like the question is that it was so vague, and it didn't seem practical. It didn't seem like, electricity, magnetism, and so forth. But I always really wanted to know. And then I came upon the work of Wilhelm Reich. And so the thing that really caught me was, is this a real energy? Is it a real energy like electricity or magnetism or mechanical energy? Or is it another philosophical premise or metaphysical concept? And so in doing my studies, I came to the point where I couldn't learn anymore by reading. I cannot answer that question by reading. So I was in a experimental college that was completely self-directed, and it was probably the only school in America where I could just study anything I wanted, and I studied orgonomy. I know other schools would not have actually allowed me to actually study it. And so in my last year in school, I was devoted to going into therapy and building an accumulator to answer that question. And so in therapy, I did feel the streaming of the energy, the powerful emotions, memories of infancy, and the original emotions and armor tightening and dissolving. So that I said, wow, this is real. This is really what's being described in the books. And then I remember one day I had a cold, and I had this over-the-counter thing, Coracetin. And Dr. Raphael, my therapist, came through the waiting room. He said, Mannion, what are you taking that crap for? And I said, if I had an orgone accumulator, I wouldn't. And so we talked about it, and I got the directions on how to build one, and I'm not very good at those things. So with the help of friends, I built an accumulator, and I was able to then feel pretty immediately the energy in the accumulator. And so I had an answer to those that question, is this a real energy, or is this another another concept? So if we could go to the next slide. And so this is an important remark that Reich made, that he knew about the history of a life energy, and then he describes that the difference in his is that it was demonstrable and measurable, and that's what I was discovering in the next slide. And so this is Reich's definition of the energy. And Trish and I were in a coffee shop, and we got in a conversation with a new young cardiologist, and we got into a discussion of energy. So she said, what's the energy? So I gave this description a little bit more, and she said, yeah, but what is it? And so, but that was how Reich described it. And again, you can test it. You can show that it's not just a subjective sensation. And the next slide. And then this really struck me when I was young, that Reich didn't think it was so amazing that he discovered it. What was amazing was it had been discovered over and over and over for 2,500 years, but been explained away or ignored. And I recently accidentally found a note of mine from maybe 15 years ago. There's an author named Michael Frayn who wrote a popular play called Copenhagen. And he wrote I can't remember the name of his book now, about human consciousness, but he describes seeing the Orgone energy. He goes into a meditative state and he sees the energy, and he describes it exactly the way Reich would describe it. And then he says, but it's just a totally meaningless thing, and I knew I shouldn't have to pay any attention to it, so I just forgot about it and moved on. And that's like a 21st century example of what Reich said, that it was, whenever it was discovered, it was it kind of is astonishing when you come across it. Next slide. And these are a list of the various kind of names over the thousands of years. So you have Qi and Prana, the ancient Chinese and ancient Indian from the Eastern continent. Pneuma is the Greek, and then Hippocrates even had a name for the life energy. And years ago, I was writing a book, future chapter was the future of medicine. And I think energy medicine is the future of medicine. And when you look into this, every tradition said the physician doesn't heal. The physician helps the person access the life energy or the life force within, and that's what heals. So even Hippocrates, the founder of our allopathic tradition, which does not follow that principle, they all knew that how do you help the person harness his or her own life energy for healing? And that was really it. And one time I was up at the Reich Museum, and Tom Ross was Reich's assistant and worked there. And he said a woman had come from New York and Reich wasn't around. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry to miss him because he cured my cancer. And I just wanted to thank him. So Mr. Ross told Reich later that night when he saw him, and Reich said, I didn't cure her cancer. She decided she wanted to live. Yeah. And so that's how do you help a person harness his or her own healing? And so people trying to do this, Kilner is a very interesting guy. You'll see a picture of him a little later. But you can see Burr was a contemporary of Reich's at Yale. And there's Reich himself, and Rupert Sheldrake, some of you may know. So. But anyway, you could see that people really have been trying to grasp this for 2,500 years. Next slide. So, and then when you get into the scientific investigation of the Orgone energy, I'm not a scientist, and so I don't play one on TV, and so, but I could see that this was all involved. But when I was young, I wanted to demonstrate to myself the validity of these things. So I'll give you one example that was very powerful. Reich in the Cancer Biopathy describes creating a dark room and seeing the energy in the dark. So I was doing photography then, and I had equipment I could create a dark room. So there was no electromagnetic light there. And so you sit there about 20 minutes, and the after impressions leave your retina. And so imagine you're the accumulator, and I'm here, and I can't see anything, but I'm about this far away, and I'm there, the after impressions are gone, and then suddenly there's kind of like a pale, yellowish, glowing kind of light. Like if you come in from a bright outdoors into a dark room, there's like a light in your retina. And then it got stronger and stronger, and it was a very dry, there's more free energy in the atmosphere with low humidity. It was a very low humidity day in the spring. And suddenly, points of light are coming up from the floor, coming into the walls, coming down from the ceiling, and coming from behind me. And they're moving so fast that I have the Doppler effect. Like if you're sitting in a train near another train, and the other train moved, and you think you moved, but you're not. But the energy was streaming past, and this where the accumulator was grew brighter and brighter and brighter. And I got so nervous. I got so scared. And I turned the light on, but I'd read about this. I had read in the cancer biopathy chapter that often people are so shocked by this and they get very anxious. So I went into the next room, I walked around, I breathed, I settled down. And I went back in and did it again. And the same thing happened. And I was anxious, but I was not as anxious. But I still, a little nervous, and I turned the light on. I went back and I did it the third time. And I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. And I thought, oh my God, this is the energy people have been investigating and yearning to connect with for thousands of years. And Reich was right. And so I was in school then, and we all lived in an apartment building. And I went upstairs and I got my brother who was there, my girl, and George Marie and Lisa. We were like that, we'd been on treasure hunt, right, books. They'd been burned and banned. And so people would say, I found one in this used bookstore. I found one in this library, And so we were collecting them. So I brought them to my apartment and I told them to come into this room. I had this exciting thing. I didn't tell them what it was because I didn't want to, plant it in their minds. So we did the same experiment. They, the four of them saw it. And they had the fear, anxiety reaction that I had, but they left, and they wouldn't come do it again. And afterwards, I realized, wow, they had the reaction the world had to Reich. My brother was very anxious. My girlfriend was silent and thought, I'm stuck with this now. I'm living with this guy, and we have an accumulator in the apartment, but it's freaking me out. And then my other friends left silently. And the next morning when I left my apartment, I opened my door and they had piled all the Reich books that we had collected that they were reading. And then they put them in my door, and they were really nasty to me the whole rest of the school. So these were the reactions that Reich got to the energy: was silence, anxiety, and hostility. But I could never get them to go back in and go through the anxiety and go through the fear and get to the core part, like Dr. Simonian was showing. On the surface, everybody liked it. And in the core, they would have, but intervening was the armoring, and they couldn't get through that. So that was a enormously powerful proof to me of the reality of the physical energy. And then I did some unscientific science experiments where I irradiated some seeds and didn't irradiate others from the same packet. And the Orgone irradiated seeds grew faster and stronger. I made Bion water, which you can read about in the cancer biopathy. It's a energy water. And my girlfriend had accidentally put way too much Miracle Grow in the plant and basically killed it. But I saw that the stem was still green. So I replanted it, and I used all this Bion water. Boom, it came back to, they lived decades after this. But then I would use it on regular plants, and it seemed to have this powerful effect. And even when Trish and I got together, I wound up making some for her, and she used it on a plant. So these were proving to me that this was a real energy, and the things that Reich was saying in his books really happened. And the last one I would just like to share is I had a cat and an Irish setter at the time. And my cat on her own used to use the accumulator, and she would jump through the window and sit in there. And then there was a small accumulator with a funnel, and somehow she got pregnant. I lived in a fifth floor walk-up apartment, and a male cat got in, and so she got pregnant. And the shooter is a small accumulator with a tube and a funnel, and so it was on a bureau, and Kitten was her name. She would jump up, and she'd position the babies right where the energy was radiating from the funnel, and then she would stretch and she'd turn around and she'd position the other side. And she had the most incredible alive kittens, and she used it regularly, and that took it out of human psychology. So no one could say Michael is the weird guy and he believes all these weird things, or he wants it to work. It's psychosomatic or it's placebo. And then my dog was hit by a car when he was little, and it battered his pelvis down the middle, and one side was so broken it was like a crossword puzzle of pieces. And fortunately, the veteran vet saved his life, and for 2 months I used Orgone pads on him, and I would use a funnel to move the energy. And when I brought him back, I think I was like 22, and I don't think even acupuncture was known very much in America. So the vet came out of the room, and he was shaking, and he said to Lisa, and he said, come in here. And on a light box was the original x-ray from the day my dog was hit. And he said, if I told anyone that this x-ray is this dog, 8 weeks later, they'd say, you had a nice career before you hurt anybody, maybe you should hang up your shingle, because that's totally impossible. When you looked at the x-ray of the dog, it was like nothing had ever happened. And so it was the organ energy healing. So again, that was something not human psychology, not anything that you could reasonably, explain away.
Question on the background physics and science. So when you describe yourself in that room in front of the accumulator,
Yes.
And you talk about energy,
Yes.
is the energy coming out of the accumulator
Toward it?
or you're
No,
seeing something?
We'll get to this. It's not accepted yet, but there's a non-electromagnetic energy field around the planet, not just the gaseous atmosphere. And so when Reich was doing his studies, I'll do a little bit more later, but in a way you could say that Reich, he started studying libido or energy in people, and they found libido was real. There is a real sexual energy, but it's a specific biological energy. But then he discovered through his experiments that there's an energy field of this orgone energy in the planet, and that actually the energy field around the planet is a function of a primordial orgone energy that permeates space. And so you could look at an ancient tradition like Taoism and say Reich was a mid-20th century scientist who made demonstrable, measurable, and usable the fundamental principles of Taoism: cosmic chi, breath chi, and body chi. Cosmic chi, atmospheric chi, body chi, and breath chi. So, but he took it out of metaphysics and into physics. But our physics today was not open to him. So I have the next slide. I hope that helps a little. We'll go more into it. So a key thing in orgone work is you have to see it and feel it. You don't have to see electricity. You don't have to see or feel mechanical energy. You don't want to feel electricity. You don't want to get a shock. But with orgone, it's not a mechanistic thing, and it's not a spiritual thing in some other dimension. And so that was a key thing, and that was really intuitively what I was doing when I was young. I was seeing it and I was feeling it. And if you can't do that, it's I think impossible really to work with it. And it's one of the big reasons there's really no significant development since Reich died. The next slide. But Reich was a scientist. He was not a mechanistic scientist. He called his approach a functional approach. And the functional required the integration of the subjective and the objective. And you couldn't depend on either one alone. You needed each to confirm the other. And so and part of it was your feelings, because the energy, emotion means to move out. Emotions are energy. And so when like when I was in therapy and there'd be all the energy moving, I would subjectively perceive them as emotions of different sorts. And so we have a young friend who's a solar engineer, and he'd never seen an accumulator, and he came to visit us, and he walked right up to it, and he opened the door, and he put his hand about this far away from the wall, and then he touched the wall, which is made of metal, and he said, "This is very interesting. I feel heat radiating from the metal, but the metal is cold." And so this, as a scientist, this intrigued him in this. And but so you need to confirm your own experiences with testing in this kind of work. So next slide. Yeah, and so when I was doing research for this talk, I came across a note by Reich that for him, there was a great lack in the integration of this, which is why that young man had that question, and it's so hard to answer about the specifics of the physical nature of the orgone energy. Is that there's lots of people reports of different things they see, but no one has, I think, taken the whole collection of observations and integrated them into a coherent picture. So the next slide. And so, but a couple of years ago, I had an idea that before this, that it would be great to have a primer on the physical attributes of the orgone energy to help people, to help them understand specifically what it is and distinguish it from mechanistic kind of energies, or distinguish it from metaphysical and spiritual concepts. And in these books, Reich actually has sections where he presents the energy in schematic details, in specifics, and answers these kind of questions. So I thought if you put them together and had an introduction and had some little segue material, you could create like a 125-page primer on that would answer this question of what are the physical specific attributes of this energy. So I don't know if anyone would do it, but the biopathy in chapter 4 is one. Ether Garden Devil has the chapters, and the Orgoner experience is an amazing book about ushering in a whole new view of the universe based on energy. And the Orgone Energy Accumulator, its scientific and medical use, is a wonderful pamphlet you can get from the Wilhelm Reich Museum. It's about like 48 pages long, and it's very reader friendly and just gives you the information you need to know about this. And that's another good source. And then Contact with Space, the book Connie mentioned, his last book, has one section where it does this, isolates it and puts it in a 4-point bullet point kind of thing. So this would help people, and I don't know if anyone will do it. I'm too old now. Too old to do it. Go to the next slide. And so here are some examples of the existence of the orgone energy. So I mentioned the orgone energy envelope around the planet. Sometimes when you see pictures the astronauts took from space, you see this thin blue line beyond the gaseous atmosphere of the planet. I think that's the blue radiation of the orgone field of the planet. You see it in other kinds of photos of the planet from outer space, but no one really talks about it. In astronomy, they have what they call bad seeing. That's why they have to put the observatory so high up, because there's a wavy, disturbing pattern in the atmosphere that ruins their pictures. But it's not bad seeing. It's the wavy, undulating motion of the orgone energy envelope of the planet that's ruining their pictures. And as you go higher and higher, it gets thinner. So they see it and they don't investigate it. They just call it bad seeing. And static electricity isn't really electricity. Like electrical theory contradicts the idea that the atmosphere is filled with electricity. And so static, we feel, you put on some clothing and it gets sparkly, or things stick together. But in Reich's writings, you can read his description of static as a misunderstanding of the effect of the orgone energy. And then the blueness of the sky, there's all kind of standard physics explanations of why the sky is blue. But Reich felt blue to our eyes, blue is the specific color that we see the orgone energy, and we see it in lots of orgone energy phenomena, not just in the sky. St. Elmo's fire is blue. I had an artist who would teach all his friend who teaches students, all shadows are blue. The kids would come and they would do dark coloring for the shadow, and then it doesn't look like it. But what you're really seeing is you're seeing evidence of the orgone energy. That's why the shadows are blue. If you're ever out in snow and the snow is undulating, you see the blueness of the shadows. The change of form. Sometimes like in our room at night, we have a big accumulator in the apartment. And sometimes it's foggy and kind of mysterious, and sometimes it's like striated, and sometimes it's blue-gray. Sometimes maybe if things aren't going so well in the atmosphere, it can get purplish. And sometimes if it's very excited, there are points of light, and very rare occasions, but sometimes there are mini lightning bolts. And so the energy changes forms depending on how excited it is. If there's a lot of people, or if there's some radioactive material, or if someone sets off an electric spark. And so this is another thing you can measure scientifically and observe. And then it's universal, it's everywhere. It's very hard to study anything that you can't isolate and separate. And it was actually Reich's early attempts to try to isolate the energy that led to the development of the orgone energy accumulator. And then the absorption and reflection of materials, different materials interact differently with the energy, the way electricity has conductors and insulators. The orgone metal attracts the energy and immediately repels it, and organic material attracts the energy and binds it. And so these are all ways you can study the energy, and you can show for yourself, or if you're a scientist in a much more sophisticated manner, you can do this kind of practical work. So the next slide.
If the outside of the space, there's a higher accumulation of orgone, does that affect the astronauts? Because they spend as much time?
Yes, I'll tell you an interesting story later. So anyway, this is a 0.5 micron vacuum tube, and this is like one of the fundamental visual demonstrations of the orgone energy from experiments that Reich did up in Rangeley. And if you ever go up to the Reich Museum, it's a fabulous place to go to, and in a beautiful land, and it's just an amazing, I feel, amazing museum. I don't know if they still are doing this, but this is a still picture, but they have a video, and you can see this in the video, and it's not static. It's undulating and pulsating. And my memory is that the color changes almost like from dawn to dusk during the day. There's deeper purples, and then it gets really blue, and then it changes. And when I remember the first time I saw it, the fact that it was alive and moving and pulsating was really startling. We're so used to this still photograph. But next slide. And this is Reich in the middle, and his students. That's actually was my therapist, Dr. Raphael. It's always fun for me to see him in that picture. And what Reich is doing, he's showing his students an orgone motor that he developed based on the energy in that vacuum tube I just showed you. He strung together a series of these orgone vacuum tubes, and he powered a rudimentary motor with the energy from the tubes. And they have a video of this also at the Reich Museum. They've redone their exhibit, so I don't know if they're still showing it. But it's an amazing thing. I mean, it's using the virtually limitless mass-free energy of the universe to power a motor, which would be completely non-polluting and help us in so many ways now. This was 1948, I think. And again, so this is another example of how this is not a metaphysical or philosophical concept. It's powering a motor. Next slide. And then these were, these next two slides are a list of the ways Reich tested scientifically the orgone energy. And this first one is very interesting to me. It's a modified telescope. He put some screens on the front of a telescope to make it more easy to see the orgone energy units in the sky right around us. Then he took the orgonoscope in 1941 in January. He visited Einstein. He told Einstein about his work, and Einstein was very interested and invited him to Princeton, and they spent 4 or 5 hours or more together, and Reich demonstrating this the accumulator, and he gave Einstein this orgonoscope, and Einstein saw the energy. And I read, or you read different books about him, you don't ever really see this, but 1 or 2 books about Einstein mention that Reich visited. And Einstein asked Reich, he said, how do I know it's not just subjective? And Reich said, because you see them and now you look them in the orgonoscope and they're larger, you can't magnify a subjective impression, And so that's a very easy thing. And then the accumulator, he brought Einstein a small accumulator, and there's a temperature difference, which you'll see a little slide later. The temperature is higher over the accumulator than over a control box or in the room, indicating that energy is being blocked and turning into heat, and the thermometer is measuring the heat. That's this temperature experiments here. And then I don't know, Dr. Simonian, if one of the experiments you have out there, you have a couple of them, but these are different ones. And the next slide. And the oscillation of pendulums, the pulsation of the atmosphere. This is in the news recently. They're finding out that the Earth pulsates. They think they're saying every 28 minutes, the Earth is pulsating. Mm-hmm. The motor force was the slide you saw, and later Connie is I think, going to talk about the weather work. It could influence the Orgone experiment is the Geiger counter work, and the vacuum tube you saw, and then that was part of Reich's last book. But you can read about all these things, and it's not my intent today to load you down with information, but if you need to know the answer to the question, how do I know this is a real physical energy? All this information is really there. And I didn't have scientific training, and I could understand it when I was young. Next slide. So this is an accumulator, and I built mine in 1971, and I've used it regularly since. And Tricia and I have been together since 1997, and she's been using it regularly since. And this is a shooter. It's a small accumulator. And this is the kind of setup my cat would use. And so my cat would jump through the window into the big one and then use that funnel. And this there's a woman who makes these, and this is a shooter inside the accumulator. And you sit on it and you can use the funnel to irradiate your eyes or different part of your body if you're sore or you have a cut or something. And again, this was just absolute proof. I mean, my health just got better. It was night and day. It was just better. Next slide. This is the weather engineering device, the Cloudbuster, that Connie will be talking about, and that's described in Reich's literature. And one of the fundamental things is the energy field areas can get stagnant, and you can use this device to remove the stagnant energy, and then the natural self-regulating flow of the energy field of the planet can reestablish itself if things work properly. This device here is called the Orgone medical door for deadly orgone energy buster. The way this can remove stagnant energy from the atmosphere, this can remove it from your body. And Yorgos Kavouris, I think, is talking maybe next, and he does a lot of work with this. And I asked my therapist about this when in 1971, and he said Dr. Rayfield didn't use it because it was so new. And then Reich went to prison and died, and he said it was extraordinarily powerful. The emotional changes that happened to people when he worked with this, and that he thought he didn't feel comfortable not having Reich as his mentor, and so I didn't get to use it anyway. So, but these are devices again that move it out of metaphysics into physics. Next slide. Okay, so no, you asked about the astronaut. So when I met Trish, she was the vice president of the New York chapter of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and that group, IONS, out here in California, was founded by Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut. He was the sixth man to walk on the moon. And he came to the Reich Museum with Trish and me and a Harvard astrophysicist. And Edgar saw the accumulator, the cloud buster, the door buster, the vacuum tube. And I asked him, what did he think? And he said, through these arrangements of materials, Reich is getting coherence out of the energy, and that accounts for the effects he is achieving. And one of the guests at our conference that year was with us, and she said, Dr. Mitchell, I don't know what you mean by coherence. And he said, I would use this analogy. Natural daylight is incoherent, but a laser makes it coherent. The natural energy field of the planet is incoherent, but Reich's devices are making it coherent, and that accounts for the effects he's achieving. So Edgar was a MIT doctor in science. He flew to the moon and back, despite what people say. And he founded this institute. Noetic comes from the Greek word nous, for mind or knowing. And they study all the ways that we know. And how do you bring them together? The next slide. And so this is the temperature difference. This is as on display at the Reich Museum. And they've been marking the temperature difference for, I think, almost 60 years now, or maybe more than 60 years in a little book. And it varies with the seasons, and it varies whether it's, low or high humidity. But there's always a relationship between the higher temperature at the accumulator and the lower temperature at the control device. And someone could put them on a computer now, and you could easily see the relationship. And so, next slide. So Dr. Rudy Schild is a Harvard astrophysicist who has worked with Trish and me for 25 years now. And he was with us and Dr. Mitchell at the museum. And Rudy had said about the temperature difference, if this experiment is valid, and I think it is, then my science must be fundamentally reevaluated. And Rudy is emeritus now, but he's still the most highly cited astrophysicist at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in his papers. And in some of his papers, he credits Reich, for Reich's discoveries. He does other work, and that doesn't involve this, but it was, I thought, powerful that a highly accomplished Harvard astrophysicist and an MIT graduate, Edgar Mitchell, founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences and spacefaring traveler, understand the validity of Reich's work, and that it was always my hope to meet more people like that, because what I've hoped to do over the years is build a bridge from that, I'm gonna cry a little bit, build a bridge from that darkness of the 1950s to today, so that this work can be evaluated, not like Reich as a historical figure that we honor, but that what's valuable today can take its proper role in the important work being done today. Okay. Next slide. So this is our Milky Way. I didn't think I'd get that. Breathe, breathe. This is a picture of our Milky Way. And Reich saw he discovered the spinning wave movement of the energy in space. And one of the examples was the spiral galaxies. And so if I could have the next slide. And again, this is Dr. Schill, and he said that with his discovery of the spinning wave form of movement of cosmic energy through scientific experimentation, Wilhelm Reich is the first scientist to describe the helical movement of the energy of space. And the helical is the spinning wave, like the double helix. And Reich is the first scientist to do that. And Dr. Schild is one of the first people from the conventional world of science to understand that and to acknowledge that. And I think if the future, we need more of this. We need young scientists to see the value of work, and we need young physicians to see it and to incorporate it into their work and to evolve and grow. I mean, Reich didn't think he was done. He thought he was at the beginning. He said, we're like people flying over a new territory that's never been seen, uncharted territory. We're like the people who got out of Europe and got to a sandbar off the coast of North America. We didn't do anything, but except get out of Europe, and be on the verge of a brand new realm of existence. Am I over time? Yeah. Okay. So last slide. So this is we've reached the end, and so it's demonstrable, measurable, and usable. And so ago, Trish discovered that she had dry intermediate macular degeneration, which is macular degeneration is the #1 cause of blindness in seniors. And so this was one of her retinal scans about 4 years ago. And this here, big fatty deposit called the drusen. And the drusen isn't macular degeneration, but it's associated with it. And the more severe the drusen, the worse your blindness. And so Trish used, she made herself an Orgone tunnel. And she began to use it on, you close your eye for 1 minute on each eye, once a day. And when she went back, and then she decided to do it for 1 minute on each eye twice a day. And then it was like, boom, boom, boom. The drusen were like, every time she went, the retinal specialist was stunned. And so this is an example, and then this is maybe like 6 months later, gone. And her physician is a board certified in Europe and America, which is unusual. And she has her professional persona, and she's also a little reticent herself. She jumped out of her chair and she went over to Trish and said, "You've done it. You've done it." Because there is no treatment for this. People take vitamins, they get crazy shots, on the television, needles in your eye. And now we hope in October to launch a pilot study based on Trish's healing using Orgone energy for macular degeneration. And her physician, who was originally, and I understand that, I totally understand why she's skeptical. She's now our medical consultant and a wonderful scientist from the Institute of Noetic Sciences, who was one of the few people to get an NIH grant to study human bioenergy therapy. He's the scientist who's going to lead the actual experiment. And so we've moved from demonstrating, measuring, to using, and we hope that this experiment will show that other people heal like Trish, and then we can go to a larger experiment. And so I hope that it can open. The door was slammed shut when Reich was prosecuted and killed. And we hope that if we can get it open a little, other people will be encouraged to try and do their experiments, and then we can get the door open. So
Thank you.
Thank you.